You're listening to the premiere podcast of Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, direct from the studios of DG Entertainment. Our mission? To present professional voiceover artists performing their favorite poetry and prose. We will also provide an exclusive inside look into their careers and learn more about how they made it to the top. I'm Gary Forbes. On this special holiday edition, you will hear from these talented voice actors. James Garrett.
This is Hogwarts, a school just like yours.
Do not adjust your television.
One of the most anticipated motion picture events of the year, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, rated PG.
Debbie Derryberry.
What am I gonna do? Think. Boring blast!
Where's Mommy going? She's supposed to help me with my Halloween costume.
Hey, I'm Junior, and I'm from the center of the earth.
Peter Jessup.
What do I tell my daughter? Do I tell her that her grandpa's worth more than her grandma? That her dad is worth more than her mom?
We infiltrate the facility, secure the transmitter, and bring it back here.
Justice League, into action!
Sylvia Villagran.
Esta vez no te perderás ni un gol. Vive la Copa Mundial de la FIFA con Verizon Wireless. Kids want to pick everything. They're kids. That's why I loved it when I found out about McDonald's Happy Meal choices.
Watch Jeopardy! Weeknights at 7 on ABC 7.
And George Deloyo.
This Christmas, experience the adventure so real. Walking with dinosaurs.
Get ready to find America's next superstar. American Idol. The new season premieres this January on Fox.
Our podcast begins with a spotlight on James Garrett. James is a British-born actor, famous for his roles in movies like Titanic, Batman Bad Blood, and Time After Time. He has also performed with England's Royal Shakespeare Company. James is well known for his work in commercials, animation, and of course, as the extraordinary voice of all the Harry Potter movie trailers, TV, and radio spots. To begin, James talks about the early days and how his career evolved over time.
The first things I did were amateur dramatics. My older brother was an actor. My father was in opera, so I didn't want to have anything to do with that. I wanted to be a steeplechase jockey and win the Grand National. No offense to Elizabeth Taylor. And things evolved, and eventually I started doing small parts. I was in early days of commercial television. If you're on the golf course with Sean Connery, don't ever say what I'm about to tell you now. You were very good in The Boy with the Meat Axe, which was an episode in a series called Armchair Theatre. And I worked with Maggie Smith, different people. And then eventually I got to Stratford-on-Avon, and I was there for the birthday season, 64. People like Ian Holm, David Warner, and Malcolm McDowell, whom I later worked with on a movie out here in L.A. about Jack the Ripper. So these things, like the voiceover side of it, it wasn't intentional, it just happened by accident. I was an actor, and the voiceover thing just came along, you know.
And now, James reveals how his incredible association with one of the biggest movie franchises in history began.
I think it was the first time I got a call to read for the Potter stuff. Before that, I'd just done odds and ends and nothing very important. And I guessed, as Sally Field would say, they liked me. I got a call to go in on Saturday. They told me it was books on tape, and it wasn't books on tape at all, and I guess it was an audition. And the next I heard that they wanted me to do the Potter stuff, which was great, you know. I was fortunate enough to do the voice for the TV, for the movies, and for the radio. I love radio. Perhaps that's why I enjoy working in front of a microphone. When I grew up in England, we listened to a lot of radio plays. That was our moment of joy. The radio was a big thing. People my age in England, for instance, Christmas, 3 o'clock, we'd all gather round the radio and listen to the Queen's speech. The Christmas tree would be there with the lights on. And in those days, the lights weren't like today. They were the size of grapefruits. But the thing I remember most as we head towards Christmas is waking up in the morning on Christmas Day And the smells. The smells more than anything else. That was Christmas for me. The lights and the Queen's speech and the smells of Christmas. My wife and I'll spend Christmas for the first time with my son who's married, so the whole thing is a new adventure. I'm looking forward to that.
Finally, James talks about the special holiday poem he selected and why he chose to read it.
I chose it because it seems to cover a great many things to do with Christmas, and it has a sort of almost a Shakespearean sonnet to it, the way Longfellow wrote it. And I understand he wrote it at the time his son went off to the Civil War. This was a very special piece that he wrote. Well, it's Christmas Bells by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And thought how, as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. To ringing, singing on its way, the world revolved from night to day. A voice, a chime, a chant sublime of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then from the each black accursed mouth the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound the carols drowned of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It was as if an earthquake rent the hearthstones of a continent, and made forlorn the households born of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then peal the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men.
Coming up on Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, Debbie Derryberry. You're listening to Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs. Keep listening for a very special rendition of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. This DG Entertainment classic features famous VO artists, including SpongeBob's Tom Kenny, the late great Gary Owens, Winnie the Pooh's Jim Cummings, and the most legendary VO artist of them all, Don LaFontaine, plus many more. Debbie Derryberry is an award-winning voice actress, well known for her commercials and animation work. She is famous for her role as Jimmy Neutron and hundreds of other characters. She is also a singer, voice trainer, and author of the book VoiceOver 101, How to Succeed as a Voice Actor. After the prerequisite period of auditions and smaller jobs, Debbie describes her first big break and how her career finally took off.
I think the first breakthrough VO job for me was definitely Jimmy Neutron. It was some interstitials, then it was a feature film, then Oscar nominated, then the series, and from there, it's just been 30 years of fabulous voiceoverness. Currently, I've got F is for Family, which is an awesome show on Netflix. No, not to be watched if you're easily offended, but it is a very funny show with Bill Burr, who's this amazing stand-up comic, and the writing team is phenomenal. Characters I can relate to that might be an extension of me. Let's see, all the little boy voices that I voice that I never get to be a boy in real life. Jimmy Neutron was so smart, and I'm not saying I'm a smarty pants, but I was a pre-med, and all those big words were like the culmination of my pre-med college career, because I could say those big words. I really like ones that sing, because that's my passion, is singing and writing songs and playing guitar. And once in a great while, I'll get to sing in some of my cartoons. I love accents. On Monster High, Draculaura had a really cool sort of Transylvanian accent. And it's a way for I mean, really, when you sound like me, who's going to believe you that you're going to be a doctor? But I'm so glad there's a way to make a living when you sound like me, you know? Because it's sort of out of my control. That's just the way it is. Some of the projects I've worked on this year, from Wreck-It Ralph 2, Smurfs, and the Trolls movie, one that just came out called Christmas Chronicles. I'm one of the little elves. In fact, I got to be one of the Macy's parade floats, the balloons. And I was also a balloon 18 years ago as Jimmy Neutron. So I'm kind of floating on cloud nine. Do you like that pun? I don't know if it was a bucket list for me, but that was kind of exciting. So a lot of the animated films I've been working on, and I'm working on some now I'm not allowed to talk about, but it's been super fun. And of course the F is for Family is just way, way too much fun. And Victor Valentino over at Cartoon Network, and Tig Tone on Adult Swim, that'll be out really soon. So I stay busy and I have a great time.
Debbie is a multi-talented performer, and she talks about some of the other interesting aspects of her career.
I do like coaching people. I have my home studio, as we all do, and people call me and say, Deb, can you coach me on this big animation audition? And I really like helping people do that, and people book some great things out of my booth, and it makes me feel good. People constantly ask me questions that I'm not sure why they ask me. Maybe I've been doing it so long they think I know, but it seems to be successful, so I wrote it down in a book called Voiceover 101, How to Succeed as a Voice Actor. And, it's on Amazon. You can get it as a Kindle. It's Samuel French. And I hope that it'll help people get an overview as well as really specific answers into the world of voiceover.
Debbie talks about some of her fondest memories and what the holidays mean to her.
So my fondest memories of holiday time, I have a couple. So we were the only Jewish family in my city. So the day after Christmas, we would run down to our friend's house who got the most presents and get to totally play with their toys. That was good fun. Best memory is first night of Hanukkah, everybody coming over, Mom and there were 3 Jewish families, but only one in the city where I lived in. And they'd all make latkes, and this was way before donuts was a thing. So we'd just have potato pancakes and brisket, and everybody would get a present to open, and we'd play dreidel and have tons of chocolate, and get out my guitar, and we'd sing Hanukkah songs, all 2 of them. So I really, really loved that.
The poem Debbie has chosen has a particular personal and emotional attachment to her, and the message it provides is truly inspiring.
The poem I selected is actually in my book, and it's a poem my mom gave to me. She actually wrote it down by hand, and I thought, well, that's a really appropriate poem to put in my book. So Mom's passed away, and it's been 7 years, and this was the week she passed away, so it's really sad. So I kept this poem in my files for a really long time, and it's called Don't Quit, which it's kind of funny that she'd give it to me, because that is something I would never, ever do anyway. But I'm glad she gave it to me. Maybe it's so I could share it with other people. My mom gave it to me, but she didn't write it. I looked it up, and somebody said that it might have been an archbishop or somebody in the church somewhere up there, but the author is unknown, which I can just say I don't know who wrote it now. Don't quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a fellow turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup, and he learned too late, when the night came down, how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt, and you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that you mustn't quit.
Coming up on Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, Peter Jessup.
Hi, I'm Anika Noni Rose. Whether I'm starring as a princess in a Disney movie, on Broadway, or performing music, my success is all about reading. And getting kids reading at an early age is essential to their success as well. In a World with Books does just that, providing books to disadvantaged and underserved children, free books that they can call their own. You can be a part of this by going to inaworldwithbooks.org and donating now. Remember, we can change a life, one book at a time.
Peter Jessup is a film, TV, and voice actor who has become tremendously successful in the very specialized field of video games. He has performed over 40 roles and is well known as Mirok, antagonist of The Elder Scrolls V. He also provides voices in such video game hits as Fallout 4, Destiny, and Red Dead Redemption 2. As he begins the discussion, Peter looks back and recalls his early success as a voice actor.
My first big break in video games, I really started doing video games back in the 90s when they were first beginning to add voices. I did an expansion pack for a game called Mech Warrior. Every sound clip had to be no longer than 7 seconds because that was the maximum the technology could handle. So we had to do all of our lines in 7-second bits. But yeah, the Mech Warrior expansion packs for the Ghost Bear Legacy, I think, was the first one. The big ones, I think the original Resident Evil was a big one. That was the first really cinematic video game with cutscenes that we actually got to do some actual voice acting in. Skyrim, I'm Mirok, the evil dragonborn that you have to defeat. Paladin Danse is probably the most famous character in video games that I've done from Fallout 4. Video games have a similarity with commercial and promo in that you're usually by yourself in a booth. They give you a list of lines. You have to figure out your character from the context of the lines. There's really not a lot of direction for that. As opposed to animation where you're in a room full of other actors and you actually get to interact. So you have to create not only the environment you're in when you record a video game, you have to create the person you're talking to. You know, it's all done in a vacuum. Engaging the player as a character is really situationally dependent. I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of characters in video games you can play. You can be a villain that they have to defeat. You can be a companion. You can just be someone they're buying, health packs from. So depending on the situation, first figuring out what kind of a character you are. Am I just a guy in a store? Or am I helping this person? You can create your own relationship. And it's basically up to you as a voice actor to sort of make up your own story because they're going to put it in whatever context they want. It's more a question of giving yourself a reference point. I just found out that I'm in Red Dead Redemption 2. I had forgotten I'd done it. They give you code names for all of the games, and I didn't realize that's what it was that I was doing. And I guess a fan found me there and posted it online. It was funny to see the video.
Peter remembers the holidays as he was growing up and how he will celebrate this year.
I come from an interfaith family, so we did both Hanukkah and Christmas growing up. But really, I think as a kid, going down to visit my grandparents, they had retired. My grandparents are British, and they retired to Florida, of all places, because that's what you did back in the 70s as an old person, I guess. And going down to Florida for Christmas, which, there was no snow, but you had great fresh orange juice. And just getting to see my cousins who I didn't see very often. Yeah, it was a great sort of childhood experience to just get together with the family because we didn't really see them very much. We lived all over the country. Hanukkah's in a different sort of time slot every year. And I do this with my kids too because my wife is Catholic. So we do Hanukkah for 8 days when it's Hanukkah time. I think the kids are more interested in getting presents than they are in the actual cultural relevance of the holiday itself. And then we just do Christmas. It's not really an either or. There's sort of little separate chunks of holiday. We'll be home for the holidays this year. 2 of my boys are off at college, so they won't be getting back until after Hanukkah's over. My youngest is a senior in high school, so he and I will get to do Hanukkah by ourselves, which will be fine. And then the other 2 boys get back and we'll all have Christmas, and my wife has got a dozen relatives that are all going to come over, and we do a huge Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve. and then another huge Christmas lunch on Christmas Day because why not?
Peter talks about the unique poem he has chosen to share and the background on why he selected it.
The poem I chose is called Everyone Loves Christmas. It's by a guy named Nicholas Gordon. And when I looked at it, it reminded me very specifically of when I was a kid, the Beatles used to do a Christmas record every year for their fan club. And I got a copy of all of their Christmas records on an LP when I was a teenager. And for whatever reason, this just really hit me as being sort of a very Beatle-y Christmas record kind of a poem. It's absurd. It's kind of silly, and that was the sort of thing that they would do on their little records. They'd just goof around in front of a microphone for 10, 15 minutes to say thank you to their fans for the year. Yeah, it tickled me, so I thought I would do it with a sort of a Scouser read. Everyone Loves Christmas by Nicholas Gordon. Everyone loves Christmas, even flies and fleas, even seals and snakes and snails, beavers, bats and bees. Elephants love Christmas, and hamsters, horses, hares. Penguins, parrots, porpoises, belugas, bedbugs, bears. Don't you just love Christmas? All the world's at peace. Wolves lie down with walruses, while goats give gifts to geese.
Coming up on Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, Sylvia Villagrán. You're listening to Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs. Keep listening for a very special rendition of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. This DG Entertainment classic features famous VO artists, including SpongeBob's Tom Kenny, the late great Gary Owens, Winnie the Pooh's Jim Cummings, and the most legendary VO artist of them all, Don LaFontaine, plus many more. Sylvia Villagrán is a native Angelino who is well thought of as one of today's best bilingual voice actresses. Her TV and commercial work includes Jeopardy, Disney Junior, The Doctors, MTV, Telemundo, HealthNet, and Samsung. A highlight of her career was providing the voice for the historic 2016 Democratic National Convention. Sylvia begins by discussing the early days of growing up in a Spanish-only speaking home.
So when I was growing up, my family, both my mom and dad, are originally from Mexico. They came here as immigrants. When I was born, it was pretty much made clear that I would not be speaking English at home. It was kind of a dual existence for me where at home I would, watch Spanish television and read Spanish newspapers and listen to, Spanish radio stations, and we would speak Spanish and everything was in Spanish. And then I would go out into the world and basically, everything else was completely English speaking. I felt very different when I would go out into the world with my friends and in my life. My mom and dad had they both came from, they're very business savvy. She knew about business. My dad then, was really very, very smart, picked things up very, very quickly. And he got a job. It was a film distributing company in the shipping department. And he became sort of a jack of all trades and worked his way up to then running the business. And I grew up in the entertainment industry. I grew up with directors and producers and actors. And so I was privy to the way the industry worked. So I was not at all impressed by the industry. So I think all of that colored who I was and who I am today in the industry, because I really love what I do, but I don't look at it like, oh, I'm so fabulous, because I grew up with that and I know what it really is, which is it's all smoke and mirrors. It shows up as glamour, but it really isn't. It's a lot of hard work.
Sylvia talks about how the changes in culture benefited her career, both as a Latina and a woman.
So I think what set me on my way for voiceover, I think I was always very into it because when I was a little girl, my mom bought me a book. It was a children's book in Spanish. It came with a record. There's something about the spoken word that really you can't get with anything else. I mean, it's just, I think there's something so primal about listening to somebody tell you a story. I don't think there's anything better than having someone tell you a story. And it is, I think, so visceral when you're a child. And I think that really did color me in what I do, because I think it really does just comes down to storytelling, truly. Tell me a story. Just by mistake, I got a job in radio. This was truly the reason I got into voiceover. I was working at a radio station and there was a disc jockey, and he told me this urban legend on how he did voiceovers. And I said, well, so what does that mean? And he says, well, I did commercials. I thought that was just the coolest thing. I just, that's all I wanted to do. It took many years, and it was, I think, in 1989, if you remember Ricky Martin, La Vida Loca. And then it was sexy to be Latino. Salma Hayek, J-Lo, Mark Anthony, Ricky Martin. It was sexy to be Latino. And all of a sudden, the doors opened for me. And now I was invited, to the cool kids table to audition for English language stuff. Probably the coolest gig I've ever had, where I was truly starstruck and I was truly pinch me, was the DNC. The first one that I did was in 2012 with Barack Obama. And then the second one was in 2016 with Hillary. But I got to announce Barack Obama. I think that one, even though I've done other award shows, I've done the People's Choice and AFI, but this one, there was something, it's historical. That is probably the coolest. I think that the trends in general show that there's a very big Hispanic population out there, and they have a lot of money to spend. All the things that I did for so long sort of prepared me for this moment in time, which I think is kind of interesting. So I work constantly in both languages. Currently, I have the El Pollo Loco account, which is very cool. Having a fast food as a woman, that's new. Mostly, it's mostly men. Men are the ones who used to do promo. Men used to be the ones who did all the big national campaigns. It's kind of a big deal. I think we're making inroads, as for women and definitely for Latinos.
Sylvia talks about her family holiday traditions and why this is her favorite time of year.
For me, during the holidays, with my mom and my dad and my siblings, I grew up traditionally in Mexico, we make tamales. And so our yearly tradition was that my mom would buy the masa, and then we have to make the chili sauce. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I don't ever remember not helping her. It was just, and I'm the oldest, so I always had to help her with, with the cooking. So, as I got older, I think I was maybe in my 20s. So I invited a handful of people to come and help me. And they were so excited. They're like, oh my God, I'm so going to come over. And this was for me, it was a chore. It was just such a burden, sitting there and making the tamales. And then when my friends came over, they were like, oh, they were so excited, and how you do it and how you fold them and how you what you put in there. That's my Christmas tradition.
Sylvia gives us a personal look into the poem she will share and its meaning for Christmas.
Well, the reason I picked this particular poem, I think, is because, the holidays really, whatever holiday you happen to celebrate, I think it's all about family and about home. And I think that nothing really creates a home more than a mom. And for me in particular, that definitely holds true. My mom is probably one of my greatest examples to what a strong woman is. She's been my greatest champion, my consigliere, so I think that that's probably the reason why I picked this particular poem, because mom is what Christmas is about. This is Mothers Mean Much More on Christmas Day by Nicholas Gordon. Mothers mean much more on Christmas Day, even though they're loved the whole year round. Rich memories lie knee-deep on the ground, recalling years when gifts unopened lay, years of Christmases near wild with play. Christmases of dreams unwrapped and crowned, happiness with wings and joy unbound, reveling in myths time would betray. In you, there lies the spirit of pure giving, sweetness that finds pleasure in my smile, the gift I can reopen every year. More than my own, I find your heart forgiving, a home where I am welcome all the while, so I can rest assured, for you are near.
Coming up on Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, George Deloyo.
Hi, I'm Nita Whitaker, founder and president of In a World with Books, and we're on a mission. We love books, and we want kids to love them too. They expand the imagination and are vitally important to their development. We provide disadvantaged and underserved children with books free of charge, new books they can call their own. Help us by going to inaworldwithbooks.org and donate now. We want every child we can reach to have a book in their home, their heart, and their hand. Thank you.
George Deloyo began his acting career performing theater in New York and later moved to Los Angeles, where he starred in numerous TV and movie roles. Later, with the help of legendary VO Don LaFontaine, he was able to transition into the world of voiceover. His voice work for Fox included the groundbreaking American Idol, and he has narrated over 500 movie trailers. George begins his discussion by talking about trying to break into the world of voice acting and movie trailers, and how being bilingual became a huge advantage.
Well, my entry into the world of voiceover and the career that followed came by way of my career as an actor, which is how I began in New York, on and off Broadway, doing theater. And that ultimately brought me to Los Angeles to work for Universal Studios as a contract player. So I did that for a couple of years. But eventually, a friend of mine suggested that I do a voiceover demo tape. I think he heard something in my voice that he thought might be worthy. I was reluctant, but eventually I said, sure, I'll do it. Just tell me where to go and what to do. And he sent me to a place. I did a demo, and I didn't think much of it. Anyway, I sent it out to a couple places. Nobody seemed interested. And then finally, somebody at the Tischerman agency who worked there, Nancy Simon, who was an agent there, saw my picture and tape in the garbage where it had been thrown away. And she said, wait, I know this guy. And she looked at the picture. She said, yeah, that's George. And she remembered me. She said, look, I want to sign you. And she did. And things took off. The first job I got, I remember, was a Carl's Jr. and radio. And actually, it was the first thing I auditioned for. So I was sitting there waiting in the room to go in. And I remember thinking, wow, these people are so good. Because, I mean, first of all, the way they say, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. You know, go, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? These guys are amazing. And then I could hear through the wall the sound of some of the people recording. And I thought, wow, I don't know if I can do this. But anyway, somehow or another, I ended up getting that commercial. And so I remember that as being my first job. And a few years later, I did a demo and it got my first gig for a thing called Bitter Sugar, which was a Spanish film. It was a foreign film. They asked me to do the trailer, and the way they asked, they said, we want a Spanish Don LaFontaine, or a Spanish-speaking Don LaFontaine. But the big thing in terms of trailers that kind of hit was I got the Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann film with DiCaprio and Claire Danes. That was fantastic because that really kind of broke through for me. I got to do that. And I did all their commercials for radio and television and the trailer. And again, it was one of those things where they said, wait, you speak Spanish? I go, yeah. And they go, well, let's do both. And that was a breakthrough for me.
George talks about his relationship with Don LaFontaine and how that became a real game changer.
I did go around with Don LaFontaine, who was very generous, wonderful man, and became a good friend of mine in the last few years of his life. I had the privilege of going around with him in his limousine. He had a limousine at the time and was driven everywhere. It's kind of famous. Had his initials on the door, and he would go to all of his sessions, which were many, many, many sessions per day. And I had the privilege of driving around and watching him work and doing a lot of promos for NBC and others. And so what I had seen and witnessed watching Don was so impactful on me that when I sat in that booth and they started, I said, yeah, I know this. I watched the King do it, And so I did it, and it worked, and that was also an important moment because Fox heard it, and they asked me to come over to Fox Network and do all of their shows, and And I did that for actually 16 years for Fox. So yeah, there's we're still at it. And I still do a lot of Spanish spots for Fox, and I think I've done most of the Disney nature feature films. 60 Minutes for CBS.
George reminisces about his childhood and the role someone special played around the holidays.
Wow. Well, just sitting in the living room in the parlor with my dad. There's nobody else around, just he and I. And I remember him talking to me and telling me, "Do you know, George, there are angels around us that we can't see?" And I looked at him like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're all around us. You can't see us, but they're watching and they're with us and they're protecting us and they're just here with us." And I have never forgotten that. It just had such an impact on me. So it was basically about the concept of faith, really. And so when I chose what I wanted to read, I didn't make that connection until afterwards when I was reflecting upon it.
George provides the backstory on the prose he has selected and how, some 125 years later, some things never change.
We often hear the phrase, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus," and it's usually said as a bit of humor, a joke, or really sort of suggesting a bit of cynicism. And few people probably know that it's from an actual letter that was written in what was then the New York Sun. It was a letter written in answer to a letter written to the editor. So a very young girl, 8 years old, named Virginia O'Hanlon, wrote the Sun, the New York Sun, a letter. And when the editor got this letter, he handed it to a reporter named Francis Pharcellus Church. So this is September 21st, 1897. And the letter reads simply, "Dear editor, I am 9 years old. Some of my little friends say there's no Santa Claus. Papa says, if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O'Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street, New York City." And the paper wrote, "Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They've been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible to their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant in his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. And you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire some men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus, but even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not. But that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are, unseen and unseeable, in the world. You may tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Oh, Virginia, in all this world there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood.
You've been listening to the podcast Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, produced by DG Entertainment. Look for more of these upcoming podcasts to come in 2019 with more talented voice artists. And now, from the archives of DG Entertainment, a special presentation of the Clement Clark Moore poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." This special reading was produced 10 years ago and was performed by some of the greatest voiceover talent in the world, including Nate Cordry, Bobby Costanzo, Brian Cummings, Jim Cummings, Eddie Deason, Gray Delisle, John Ennis, James Garrett, Jennifer Hale, Dennis Haysbert, Tom Kenny, Don LaFontaine, Vanessa Marshall, James Mathis, Candy Milo, Gary Owens, Paul Pape, Tony Rogers, Reno Romano, Lyle Schnebley, Ashton Smith, Jim Tasker, Tia Tejada, Ray Van Ness, Sylvia Villagran, Billy West, and Danny Wright. And now, this holiday favorite.
Take it, SpongeBob. But 'twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring.
Because someone had stolen all the spoons.
Not even a porpoise.
The stockings were hung by the chimney with care,
in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
The children were nestled all snug in their beds,
while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads.
And Mama in her kerchief, and I in my cap,
had just settled down for a long winter's nap.
When out on the lawn,
I love the lawn.
There arose such a clatter.
I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter.
Away to the window,
I flew like a flash,
tore open the shutters and threw up.
This tree is heavy.
The sash, the moon and the breast of the new fallen snow
Gave the luster of midday to objects below.
When what to my wondering eyes should appear
but a miniature sleigh
and a tiny reindeer.
Remember, that was his first name, Tiny.
With a little old driver.
So lively and quick,
I knew in a moment.
It must be St. Nick.
more rapid than eagles.
his coursers they came,
And he whistled and shouted and called them by name.
Now Dasher, now Dancer,
Now Prancer and Vixen.
On Comet.
On Cupid.
on Donda and Blitzen. Sorry, didn't mean to leave you for last, Blitzen.
to the top of the porch.
to the top of the wall.
Now dash away,
Dash away!
dash away all.
Sounds like a commercial for Dash.
As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly.
When they met with an obstacle, mount to the sky.
So up to the house
The coursers they flew.
With the sleigh full of toys.
And St. Nicholas, too.
I don't even know what I'm talking about.
And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof
the prancing and pawing of each little hoof.
As I drew in my hand
And was turning around.
Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound.
He was dressed all in fur.
From his head to his foot.
and his clothes were all tarnished.
with ashes and salt.
A bundle of toys he had flung on his back.
And he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. I'm gonna lose this. This is too much, fellas. You know what I mean?
His eyes, how they twinkled.
His dimples, how merry.
His cheeks were like roses.
His nose like a cherry.
His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow.
And the beard of his chin was as white as the snow.
The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth.
And the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath.
He had a broad face
And a round little belly.
It shook when he laughed.
Like a bowl full of jelly.
He was chubby and plump like a jolly old elf, like me.
Shut up.
And I laughed when I saw him.
In spite of myself.
A wink of his eye and a twist of his head.
Soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread.
He spoke not a word but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings.
Then turned.
With a jerk.
And laying his finger aside of his nose.
And giving a nod,
Up the chimney he rose.
He sprang to his sleigh till his team gave a whistle.
And away they all flew.
like the down of a thistle.
This is the climax, folks.
But I heard him exclaim,
Ere he drove out of sight.
Happy Christmas to all.
Happy Christmas to all.
Happy Christmas to all.
Happy Christmas to all!
Happy Christmas to all. Happy Christmas to all.
Happy Christmas to all.
Happy Christmas to all. And to all, a good night.
And happy Hanukkah, too.
One more, Dawn. This time could you be a little merrier?
You've been listening to Poetry and Prose with Pro VOs, available on your favorite podcasting platforms.